So this session is called Taking After School into the School Day, How to Bridge Formal and Informal Learning Through Science and Engineering Practices. And we have three total presenters here today. So we have the formal side and then the informal side. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Crystal Miller. I work for the Escondido Union School District, and I'm the STEM teacher on special assignment. So I work with grades TK through 8. I've been a teacher for 14 years, and I really love working in the sciences. And I'm going to kick it over to my friends from the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum.
Hi, everybody. I'm Whitney Racer. As Crystal said, work at the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum in Escondido, California. If any of you have ever been up in North County, I am the director of education there, and I've worked in education for over 12 years. The majority of my time was actually spent in formal school, so it was in the classroom. It was as an administrator, as a literacy coach, as a curriculum director. Going on almost my 2-year anniversary at the museum, I shifted gears and started working at the museum in the informal sector. And it's been really fun for me to sort of think through how to, particularly this year, expose kiddos to new ideas, to particularly when it comes to STEM, and to think through how that exposure can really help them spark their curiosity and creativity for the learning that they'll do in other areas of their lives. So I'm excited to be here with you guys today, and I'm going to toss it to Miss Kimberly, who is with me at the museum.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Tomlinson. I am the Education Curriculum Manager at San Diego Children's Discovery Museum. I've been with the museum for about 4.5 years now. And prior to that, much like Whitney, I did work in formal education. I worked as a reading interventionist, an ELL teacher, and then sort of found my footing in gen ed kindergarten classrooms. And so I did all of my teaching experience in Washington, D.C. And when I moved to California, decided to expand my horizons a little bit and found the world of non-formal or informal education and fell in love. And I'm really grateful to be able to be here and be able to use sort of my formal education background in what I do every day.
So today we're going to be combining STEM enrichment activities, which all of you on the call are very good at, with the formal learning space. And we're doing that by using the science and engineering practices as our launch point, which is the doing dimension of science. So we're going to hopefully show you how to combine those today and then give you a chance to think about your own context and how we can apply that. So I'm going to toss it over to Miss Kimberly.
Awesome. Okay, so today, we wanted to make sure that we were all moving our bodies a little bit and doing an actual active practice activity because I know for myself, I'm most engaged when I am actually doing something. So I'm going to challenge all of you to join in our active practice today as we do a little bit of a science and engineering challenge so that you can sort of put yourself in the shoes or the Zoom room, I guess, of the children and students that you likely work with each day. So I'm actually going to ask that everyone help me out by putting on their student hats. I'm going to put on my teacher hat just so that we can all get in the mindset of how we can do this activity together. So what we are going to do today is we are going to actually we're going to start out by going on a scavenger hunt. So I am going to ask everyone who is participating in the session today to take just 3 minutes to go on a scavenger hunt to find 3 objects. I'm going to ask you to find something that is transparent, something that is see-through, something that is translucent, something that you can partially see through or it's blurry, you can see some light through, and something that is opaque. And I'm going to ask you to bring them back to our conference room today, our Zoom rooms today. And if you feel comfortable and are willing to share, we would love to hear what you find. So we're just going to take 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask that everyone be back at 11:11. Feel free to turn off your cameras as you go on your scavenger hunt, but I'm asking you to look for 3 things: something transparent, something translucent, and something opaque, and then bring it back so that we can share them together. So we'll see you again at about 11:11. Feel free to turn off your cameras and you can turn them on when you return, or you can give a little thumbs up reaction to show that you are ready. You have about 1 more minute if you are still searching for your objects. If you don't find all 3 of them, that's okay as well. But if you can start making your way back to the computer screen, that would be great. If you feel comfortable turning on your camera and would like to, we would love to see you. You do not have to, but I am very excited to see everyone in about 1 more minute. All right, it is 11:11. I would love to see what you have found on your scavenger hunt. Was anyone able to find all 3 objects? If you were and you would like to tell us what you found, feel free to unmute yourself. I would love to hear what you have found on your scavenger hunt, something transparent, something translucent, and something opaque. Julia, go ahead, Julia, what did you find? You can either show us or tell us what you found.
So I found transparent will be like plastic bag, like a Ziploc boxy bag. Translucent will be, it is kind of one of those paper pockets that you can see through, but not clearly.
Okay.
And then the last one will be a clipboard.
Perfect. All right, so Julie found a lot of items around her space. She found a transparent Ziploc bag, a paper packet that was see-through where you can see some of the light through, some of the color through, but it was a little bit blurry, and a clipboard. Excellent. So that is something that is opaque. You cannot see through at all. Is it Jira? What did you find?
You got it, Jira, yeah, Jira. I have plastic. I don't know if it'll show on the screen. And I have this essential oil, like the case. Is that translucent?
Can you see some of the light through? Some light shines through, but it's a little blurry.
Yeah, when it goes.
Perfect. Then yes, that is a perfect example of something that's translucent.
And then opaque is just a remote control.
A remote control. Amazing. Here's light through, it blocks out all the light. Terrific. Anybody else willing to share? Mr. Guerrero, go ahead, my friend. What did you find? Did you find something transparent, translucent, and opaque?
Good morning, everyone. Well, only transparent, my definitely my hand sanitizer.
Perfect.
Translucent, my ruler. This ruler.
Yeah.
Okay. And something this counts, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't
Oh,
see right through that. That absolutely counts. It is something opaque. You cannot see any of the light.
okay. Awesome.
Perfect. So Mr. Guerrero found his hand sanitizer, knows that that container in the hand sanitizer is clear and see-through. Found his ruler, so you can see some of the light through, but it's a little blurry because of that color, and a mat that blocks out all the light. Did anybody else want to share the objects they found on their scavenger hunt? Annabelle, go ahead. What did you find on your scavenger hunt?
Yeah, so if that was okay, I want to join in the fun as well too. So number 1 was a Ziploc baggie, that's a sandwich snack baggie. And then that's my translucent, and my other one is opaque, not opaque, what's the middle one? Translucent.
Transparent is fully see-through, translucent lets some of the light through.
Translucent is a little plastic cup from a protein shake.
Perfect.
And then the opaque one is a baking cupcake that really can't see through. Yeah. It's a bit tinted, so it's a baking cup. All of them found in my kitchen.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like Annabelle was scouring her kitchen to achieve this objective. Terrific. So found a Ziploc bag. That seems like a trend. I saw a couple of those across the screen. A measuring cup for scooping protein is translucent. It lets some light through, but not all of it. And those cupcake liners, she has some very dark ones that don't let any of the light through. I would love to show you what I found in my house. I also found a Ziploc bag. This is my transparent object. It lets all of the light through. I found streamers from my daughter's birthday, It is translucent. It lets some of the light through. You can see some light through, but not all of it. And a piece of cardboard were the objects that I found in my house. Okay, so this type of activity can be really helpful because it gets our brains moving and thinking about what we can use and what we can find around our homes. Now is where it's going to get really fun. We are actually going to do an engineering challenge. So what I am going to ask is that we use what we just figured out about transparent objects, translucent objects, and opaque objects to design and build a way to catch the light. So I'm going to take off my teacher hat for just a moment. When we are presenting this with students and with children, we often will give them a little more guidance and leadership towards sun catchers and thinking about how we can catch the light and play with the light in that way. You all are adults, however, and so I am going to invite you to interpret this however you would like. So putting my teacher hat back on, I'm going to ask you all to design and build some way to catch the light. So what I would love for you to do is we're just going to take, I'm going to say 5 to 7 minutes, depending how quick we are as engineers, how fast we can move with our designing and building, for you to actually either use the objects that you found, or you can choose other objects if they are things that you don't really want to build with, to see if you can design a way to catch the light, but also represent those 3 ways that light can be impacted by an object. So I want you to think about the objects that you chose. Can you catch the light using something transparent, translucent, and opaque? And that's the only direction I'm going to give you. I want to see what you come up with and what you can design and build. So we're just going to take 5 to 7 minutes. You're welcome to turn your cameras off to design and build something. You're welcome to leave your cameras on if you want us to see your process as you are designing and building. It is up to you, but I would love for you to figure out a way that you can catch the light. So we are going to come back here at about 11, oh, gotta do my quick math, 11:22 to 23-ish. We will send some updates in the chat and we will share out as those time deadlines are getting closer. But I wanna see what you can design and create to catch the light. All right, we will see you in a few minutes. We have about 2 more minutes. If you are still designing and building, take your time, no pressure. I'm very excited to see what you have created. Again, we are trying to think about how we can catch the light, thinking about how light waves move through when something is transparent, something is translucent, and something is opaque. About 2 more minutes and we'll come back together. All right, I am going to ask everyone to come back together. If you're still working on your design, that is okay. Feel free to keep working as I am chatting. However, I would love to hear, would anybody like to share what they designed and built? I would love to see your designs, even if they're not completely done. But I would love to hear how you used materials that you found around your house to design a way to catch light or catch sunlight. Would anybody like to share what they were working on, what they designed and built? If you're still working, I'm also happy to start with some of our presenters. I know my co-presenters are very excited to share what they've been designing and building. Chris, do you want to share what you have come up with so far? How did you catch the light? What did you design and build? What types of materials did you use?
So I've been dying to share because I'm like so proud of my design. So I used one of those packets where you have utensils. So here's the El Pollo Loco. Shameless plug. They do have a really good chicken avocado wrap. So next time you're there, check it out. So that is my transparent item. And then my translucent item was the napkin that I found inside that utensil pack. And I drew a little heart on it. And then my opaque object was a little heart leaf. It's like a heart-shaped leaf. I don't know if you can see that well, but so this is like my sun catcher. Ta-da!
Amazing. And I love how you found some really great treasures around your house to design and build your way to catch the sun, your sun catcher. Amazing. Whitney, did you want to share your design as well? I saw your hand go up a moment ago.
I sure can. So I opted not to use any opaque objects because I wanted all of the sun to be able to get through and get all of the light waves. So I used a Ziploc bag, but then in it, I put 2 coffee filters that I folded up. So, and I apologize, my blurry background might be making it look a little bit like a ghost sun catcher. But I intentionally left this slit here so that the light can come through there and that I can capture it on the other side. So that is the way that I am catching the light today.
Amazing. And I like that you made the intentional decision to exclude anything opaque because you wanted all the sunlight through. I know I can use as much vitamin D as I can get these days. So I liked that thinking as well. Would any of my other participants like to share? I think Julia, I see your thumbs up. Did you want to share what you designed and built?
Sure. So I did put the 3 elements like in a layer. Let me show you. So this is what I have. I have my clear on the top. Then that at the next level, the next layer is the one that is kind of like okay. And then that the last one is going to be like this one over here. This part, more like a telescope kind of. So when I put it through the light goes through the 2 layers and it stays within the last layer inside the cup.
I love it. And I love how you have it as a 3-dimensional sun catcher catching that light. I really liked that you thought through how you would actually keep the light inside. I think that could be a really handy way to design and build your sun catcher in the future. Did you have something else you wanted to share, Julia?
No, that was it.
Thank you for sharing. I love that solution. And I love how you use the materials you had access to in your space right now to design and build. Would anybody else like to share what they designed and built, even if it's not done, even if you know that there's maybe something else you want to add to it? Does anybody else want to share? If not, I can show you what I have designed. So I had a similar idea to both Whitney and Crystal, actually, in that I found my Ziploc bag and I thought it would be cool to put some objects inside. So I had a little bit of tape handy. And so what I actually did was inside my Ziploc bag, I taped my opaque object as well as my translucent object. So when I hold it up to my light source, which my light source is my window right here, I get a really interesting shadow from my opaque piece of cardboard, but I get the light shining through in my transparent parts and partially shining through in my translucent parts. Did anybody else want to share what they designed and built, or maybe what they are thinking about designing and building? Maybe this wasn't quite enough time to fully complete the task. Mr. Guerrero, go ahead, my friend. What would you like to share? You can either show us what you did or tell us about it.
I designed like a kind of like a, I don't know how to say, kaleidoscope.
Like a kaleidoscope, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I always have issues with that. But using toilet paper tube, and cardboard at the end just to seal it, and at the front like a Ziploc bag, and I can even paint some colors on it, just like a kaleidoscope. So if I'm not mistaken, the light's gonna get stuck in there because I have my cardboard at the end. So.
Love it. And I love that you incorporate those different elements. You're going to use a bag for your transparent component. You're going to do some paint to cause that translucency where some of the light can come through, and using the cardboard to actually catch it and have an opaque piece. Terrific. Thank you for sharing. Did you have anything else you wanted to tell us about what you would design?
No, I mean, I was drawing it because I don't have the things right now, but I just draw it. So awful drawing. But yes, I have fun though, thinking about what can I use.
And yeah. I love your thinking as well, because that is something else that is a really important component of this engineering process. It includes creating a plan. So Mr. Guerrero knew he didn't have enough time to go and find all those materials, but instead he started his plan. He started sketching out what he would draw so that once he has access to the materials he needs, he can actually start designing and building. Would anybody else like to share either their plans or their designs with us? If not, I think it is time for us to continue on and talk about why we did this activity and how this activity connects to the science and engineering practices that you all use all the time.
So you guys just got to kind of step into student roles with Miss Kimberly, and that is actually a workshop that we at the museum do with the students in SKU Union School District. And so we wanted to model this for you, one, to have a little bit of fun, but two, because it really highlights an important part of our partnership and what has developed for both the museum and the school district over a few years, and how we got to the point of being able to integrate our informal practices with the formal school day. So why this lesson? So our partnership started out about, 5 years ago in 2016, when we began doing some of our mobile exhibits at the school site. This was not at every single school. It was a little bit more sporadic, and it was definitely an enrichment opportunity. So if you look at those pictures up at the top, that's one of our mobile exhibits. It's our light wall. It's like a giant light bright, if anybody used to play with those when they were little. And it's a way for kiddos to experiment with light and play with light, but it's definitely a single standalone experience. So it's something that they would go to that exhibit, we can bring it to the school, they would experience that, and they had that one exposure to light, and then they would move on to a different mobile exhibit. And so it was something that, while it highlighted some STEM properties, and again, it was about exposure, it wasn't super intentional in terms of what we were hoping kids would take out of that. At the museum, we are all about play and learning through curiosity. And we want kids to discover their own experiences, but in a school day, there's some mastery things that need to take place, and there's some standards that kiddos need to walk away with by the end of the year. And so what happened is we had our wonderful partnership with Crystal begin, where she started to help work with us to think about how could we be a little bit more intentional with what we were doing with the exhibits and the things that we already were doing that was already really strong in STEM at the museum. So we had these exhibits, and in first grade, there is a science standard where kiddos need to learn all about light waves and sound waves. So we started to think, how could we take this one standalone experience where kids are playing with a light wall, and how can we expand that so that kids are really really starting to think through and understand the science of light waves. So from there, we came up with a really thoughtful series of lessons. We created some pre and post lessons to go along with this exhibit experience. So kids would get to have a pre-lesson in class that talked about light waves that is a little bit similar to what you just experienced, where we learned about translucent, transparent, and opaque. Then they get to go play with the light. They get to go play with the light wall, and then they would come back and actually get to create a sun catcher. And so that began sort of integrating all of these practices with this one standalone experience we had to be a little bit more thoughtful and a little bit more mastery based. The thing that has been a challenge this year, but a fun one for us to overcome, is that this year we can't have those, exhibits and those experiences that we would typically have in person. But we didn't want to lose out on our partnership, and we wanted to still ensure that kids could have these hands-on experiences that we offered at the museum, along with sort of introducing them to the standards and the engineering and science practices that are so important for them to learn during the school day. And so we took our pre and post lesson and we kind of reworked it into the lesson that you just got to participate in, which is creating a sun catcher. And they get to do that now virtually. And so over the course of the last 5 years, this has really developed into a really wonderful partnership where we've been able to do this with multiple grade levels and be able to think about what is a standalone experience that we already have, what's something that we're already doing that's already STEM based, that already has elements of science or technology or engineering or math, and how can we expand on that using the science and engineering practices to really make it a thoughtful, cohesive experience for kids that really try to highlight and target really specific aspects of the science or of the engineering process.
So in NGSS and the next generation science standards, we talk about 3 dimensions, and our session today is about specifically 1 dimension, which is the science and engineering practices. But the first dimension is the disciplinary core ideas. That's what scientists and engineers know. And that's often the hardest dimension to integrate when you're talking about bringing formal and informal together, because that's really those standards that we're talking about mastering. So that's generally going to be the last piece that you can pull in. But the science and engineering practices, they're that first piece that you can pull in. And I bet you're already doing it with a lot of your activities. So the science and engineering practices are what scientists and engineers do. They're the things that they do when they're doing science and engineering. And the cross-cutting concepts are how scientists and engineers think. They're the lens or the glasses we use to look at the world. And cross-cutting concepts, I mean, we could do a whole nother session on that too, but that's another easy way to integrate the next generation science standards. So when we look at the science and engineering practices, we actually have 8 total. And these practices go from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And they're based on what scientists and engineers do in the real world. So I'm going to give you a chance to look over that list and put in the chat which ones you think we did in our investigation. And just so you know, what we did in like 20 minutes is what first graders do over the course of an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours. So we didn't have time to show you the full sequence, but I think you get the gist. So go ahead in the chat, put which numbers you think maybe we tackled in our 20 minutes together. Okay. So we have 8 total practices, and we have some that are saying maybe we used all of them, which I feel really flattered. Thank you. I love that we used all of them. We definitely focused in on several, even though you could make the case that we kind of touched on a lot of them. And then we have maybe 2, developing and using models, 3, planning and carrying out investigations, maybe even 6, constructing explanations and designing solutions. Yeah, I know. We did use a lot of those. So you could certainly make the case for almost all of them. The ones that we really focused on here was the first one, asking questions is the science part and defining problems is the engineering part. We really wanted to make sure you knew that you had to design something to catch the light. And then the third one here, planning and carrying out investigations. So when you grabbed your 3 items and you did your test, is this transparent? Is this translucent? What happens when I put this up to my light source? What exactly happens there? So that's planning and carrying out investigations. Even though you did a little modified version of that, you were really focusing on doing a lot of investigations with a lot of different materials. But I feel so flattered everyone thinks we did all of them. I love it. Now, in that sequence, you could certainly have pulled out different ones. These are just the ones that we were most intentional about presenting to students. And when we think about using the standards as a guidepost, it's kind of a launch point. So our friends at the Children's Museum love engineering. They do engineering all the time. And I'm like, yes, that's great. But how can we be just a little bit more intentional about our engineering so that we can get some science standards as well? Because you know, during the formal day, science is the thing that sometimes gets cut just to have more time for English language arts and math. And I don't think that STEM should only be after school. That's just not okay with me. Science and STEM and enrichment and all those things belong during the day. So if we can work a little bit harder, then we can really make things work for multiple venues. So standards are our launch point. And engineering in the service of engineering, trust me, I'm all for it. But if we can attach it to an NGSS performance expectation, then we're really doing science. The whole purpose of the next generation science standards is that engineering is embedded in science. That's why we don't have science and engineering separated anymore. They're actually together. They're integrated from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, which is great. But it does pose some challenges for educators as they're trying to think about, well, how exactly do we do this? So this is what a first grade performance expectation looks like. So here's the science and engineering practices in blue, the disciplinary core ideas in orange, and then the cross-cutting concepts in green. So when they presented their light wall, I was like, oh my gosh, we have a first grade standard on light. Let's do engineering around light. And that's how that was born. And I'm going to skip these pretty quickly because they're just engineering standards. There's a lot to unpack here, but just know that if you're doing engineering, you can certainly tie it to a science standard. And I'm going to pass it over to Whitney to talk about engineering.
So like Crystal said, at the museum, we love engineering. We do it a lot, and Crystal has helped us be a little bit more intentional with how we are embedding it into an actual science concept. But what you did today was part of this engineering design process. So there's a certain process that engineers go through. And when we're thinking of science and engineering practices, like Crystal said, this is something that engineers do and scientists do in their daily lives. So we can start kiddos learning about this process and this way of thinking really early on. So you guys were first graders today. That's what our first graders get to do. And they get to start thinking about these kinds of practices and these ways of thinking really, really early on in their academic careers, which then serves them for the other sort of more in-depth STEM learning that they're doing later on when they get to middle school or high school. So the design process itself is on the side. And I would love to, if you guys could just look at those bullet points. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's ask questions, brainstorm, plan, make, try, improve. And I would love you guys to think, which of those parts of that process did you do today? So when you were trying to solve your challenge and when you were thinking through sort of the different things you're gathering, which of these elements did you do? So which of these practices did you do? And you can just put it in the chat and we'll see what people come up with. So I'm seeing some people are saying they asked questions and they did some thinking and brainstorming, and then they made and tried this, right? Which I agree. I saw, we saw Mr. Guerrero's kind of sketch. He was thinking of that brainstorming. All of you had to ask that question. You were all posed with a question at the beginning. How can you catch the light? So we were already thinking of that question. You had to brainstorm a solution to that. It looks like Oh, yep, there was lots of planning and designing that went into a prototype. So lots of kind of thinking around sort of what could this initial version of what you create be? And then you actually tried to make it, right? So if you had those materials, you actually put them together, you tried to make this design at the end that would catch the light. Most of you didn't get a chance to improve. And that is a really wonderful flag and point because that's actually something that we do as a post lesson for kids. So we get to make the sun catchers together, and then their improvement is a really important part of engineering. It's something where engineers are always trying to make things better. They're always trying to improve their designs. Sure, everybody has heard this story about how many iterations of the light bulb there were. The designs can always be better, and that's a really important part about the process because the improve can take you all the way back to the start, right? And it becomes a cyclical process. We're going over and over again, where when you try to improve it, you have to ask questions about how you can improve it. You brainstorm your solutions to improve it. So the engineering design process is really wonderful because it keeps going on and on and on, and it really is just a process and a way of thinking. And so we tried to take this way of thinking, integrate it into sort of what we already do, and embed it a little bit more in some science standards. So we did this today, all in the service of those two standards that sort of Crystal highlighted initially that our first graders are learning about, which is thinking about light waves and learning all about sort of how light waves travel through different materials that are translucent, transparent, and opaque. So what you did today was an engineering design process in the service of that science standard for light waves. Crystal, do you mind switching to the next slide? So this is something that we think that anybody can do and that you guys are probably already doing a little bit more. Or you're already probably doing it yourself in what you do, but you can be potentially a little bit more intentional with what you're doing. So anytime you're sort of starting to think about how could I maybe integrate what I'm doing, or how can I be more, and how can I integrate the science standards or the science practices and the engineering standards and practices into what I'm already doing, you can think about these guiding questions. So who's your audience? What's the age of your group? And what's the purpose? For us, we knew we were going to be working with first graders with our light wall. So we thought, let's look at what first graders need to do and let's start from there. That's a great starting point, knowing the age. There's lots of different standards, lots of different things, but knowing your age is a great place to start. And then the other thing that's really great is to think about, what is the purpose of this? So what you're doing for like a camp experience is probably not going to be as intentional as what you do for a field trip. So like Crystal said, what we're working on right now, we want it to be really intentional. We want it to be in the service of STEM. So we want to be thoughtful about how we are presenting the information, not just making it an exposure to something fun. Even though fun exposures are really important parts of learning, when you're doing a field trip for the school day, that's part of sort of a more core curriculum that you want to think through. And then other things you can think about as well is this second bullet point is kind of the biggest guiding question. So where do you already have alignment with the science and engineering practices? So like what we just did when we were thinking about that activity that we did today, are you already asking kids to make a plan? Are you already asking them to ask questions and brainstorm to solve a challenge? If you are, you're probably already asking them to be an engineer. Or if you look back and think back to sort of the science practices that Crystal highlighted, is there anything that you're asking kiddos to do that would highlight any of those items? So are you asking kids to create evaluations? Are you asking them to do some specific thinking that's going to ask them to evaluate or investigate different ideas? If you are, you're already doing science practices and you can build upon that. So that's sort of the really big push that we want to have today, is to look at what are you already doing that you can just enhance and do more of. And then the last part is, can you think through the standard itself? So once you've sort of thought of these things, then you can go look into those big standards that you saw Crystal show and sort of think through what of this language for the standard can maybe we enhance or align to a little bit more. And going through this process will really help you think through how you can take what you might already be doing in an enrichment experience and an informal setting like a camp, an after school program, and think through how could you actually build that into part of the school day for students.
And so throughout this process, throughout our relationship with Crystal and the school district overall, we have learned a lot of lessons. Some of them have been very big lessons, and they've been pandemic inspired. This past year has taught us some lessons we weren't even expecting. But in general, we have learned the importance of a collective effort and collaboration. We have been able to improve and bring intentionality into the programs that we've already been offering in a way that is really productive and helpful for students in the district. And part of our role in the museum world is to provide a structure of education, a structure of facilitation as like a model for the educators that we are working with. We also have been able to really use those standards as a roadmap for our lessons. And so to Whitney's point a few moments ago, we've always been able to bring the science fun, and that is wonderful, but being able to use those standards to guide our direction as we are making intentional choices about what to prioritize and what we are teaching, it's been a really helpful way for us to streamline what we are doing and really improve and hone in on the lessons that we are offering to students.